My name is Paula Lemons, and I'm a faculty member in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology at the University of Georgia. And I do SoTL/education research. I got into the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning as a postdoc at Duke University when a couple of mathematicians and a biologist invited me to be a researcher in a study they were conducting with teaching assistants, and that launched my career in doing this kind of thing, which is what I now do full-time as my research. But my background is in biochemistry, and I worked at the lab for years as a graduate student. So what I want to do with you today is just give a really short introduction to SoTL in STEM fields, and hopefully this will provide you with some resources you can return to. Okay, so within the next 20 minutes or so, what I hope that you'll be able to do by the end is name some ways to get off to a good start doing SoTL. Consider how to refine a research question, including some common mistakes to avoid. I'd like you to be able to go back to this webinar as a source of places to learn more, since we're only scratching the surface today. And I'd also like you to identify one action item that you could take to move your potential SoTL project forward. So let's start with a case. So this is Dr. Metters in the case of the central dogma. Dr. Metters sighed as she sat down at her desk to review her introductory biology students' exams. Another year of poor performance on the central dogma items, I suspect. She complained out loud to herself. She read 20 or so responses and could tell that the same old problems were there again. Students just don't get DNA replication, transcription, and translation, no matter how many ways I explain it. Dr. Metters tried to keep focusing on grading, but her mind drifted off. She remembered some woman she had met from Western State University. But what was her name? She was doing some type of research in her genetics course. Despite forgetting the professor's name, Dr. Metters remembered that the Western State University professor was studying the learning of genetics concepts. She was doing something with how problem solving was enhanced with an online tutorial. She spoke out loud again. Maybe that's the solution for my frustration. I need to do a SoTL project. Too distracted to grade anymore, Dr. Metters turned back to her computer and emailed. 7 new emails had arrived in the past half hour. She scanned to see who they were from. Well, what do you know, she said, smiling wide. It's an email from Dr. Sally Jenkins from Western State University. That's her name. Yeah, I think it's time for me to find out more about this SoTL stuff. So Dr. Metters is wanting to get started in SoTL. And what I want us to consider is, what should she do next? There are lots of things she could do. Not just one, but what might those be? Should she launch a pre-post test study design in her intro bio course? Should she find out what's known about student difficulties with the central dogma? Should she talk to Dr. Jenkins? Well, let's give this some consideration. And what I'd like to do, what I've prepared, is a list of top 10. We'll call it the top 10 ways Dr. Metters could get off to a good start doing SoTL. Another way to think of this list is the top 10 ways to avoid wasting her time. So number 1, phone a friend. Yes, certainly, give Dr. Jenkins a call. Just like in our scientific research, if we have a colleague or some connection who knows a method or knows something that we don't know, by all means, we should interact with them and try to learn from them. Number 2, use training wheels. So those of us who do SoTL typically have not been trained within a college of ed or within a psychology department, but we often have colleagues at our institutions who have. So here at UGA, I collaborate a lot with members of the College of Ed. At other institutions, I collaborate with people from departments of psychology. And I've also consulted with people in our higher ed institute here at UGA. So these can be great sources to help you get going with the SoTL topic, because this is what these people are trained to do. Number 3, read judiciously. Just like my thesis advisor said about my scientific research, that a day in the library can save you months in the lab, I would say the same is true for SoTL. Google Scholar is great, but there are also some great education research journals that you can just make a habit of perusing, and I'll go over those towards the end of the 20 minutes or so here. Number 4, compose as she goes. So as Dr. Metters is reading, a good idea is to keep an annotated bibliography of sources in order to remember the key references that relate to her interests. Number 5, consult her STEM office. So we're privileged within the University System of Georgia to have offices of STEM education. One of the key things they do is to provide mini grants. And this is a great way to prioritize the project you have in mind. So when I first came to the University of Georgia as a tenure track person doing SoTL research, the USG mini grants were one of the primary ways that I got my work done. So I got 2 or 3 of these that gave me the pilot data that I needed to apply for federal funding. Number 6, Dr. Metters needs to remember her limits. So it's kind of related to finding a friend, as we talked about on the last slide, but it's very important to find a collaborator or a consultant who can fill in the gaps in her knowledge. So for me, one of the key areas that I get help is with statistics. Being trained as a cell and molecular biologist, statistics is not my strong suit, and so I always partner with statisticians in my research. Number 7, take advantage of peer pressure. So it's possible that Dr. Metters has a society within her discipline that relates to education research or SoTL. I've listed SABRE here as one possibility. If you're from another scientific discipline, there are others. Number 8, sign up for a class. There may be a professional development opportunity at your institution through, for example, the College of Ed. A great opportunity that we have in biology is the Biology Scholars Program through the ASBMB, the American Society for Microbiology. And they fund people to actually come together in the summer and begin developing a SoTL project that they continue. But there are lots of ways. Even Coursera has relevant courses that you can take. 9, find a how-to book. I'll give you 2 great suggestions later. And then 10, don't bite off more than you can chew. So Dr. Metters should consider how she can refine her research question so that she really can get something done. And I want to actually pick up on that one and talk more about it. So don't bite off more than you can chew. Is your research impossible? Well, I want us to think for just a couple of minutes about how to make our research not only possible, but worth doing by framing our questions well. So here are some characteristics of good research questions, and I think you'll notice that these are not unlike the characteristics of good research questions in our scientific research. They yield results that move the field forward. They're firmly situated in the literature. They're actionable, feasible, and sharply focused, and they reveal meaningful underlying mechanisms. Some of the common mistakes that SoTL researchers make can reduce the interest of their question to a broader audience and really limit its applicability. So there are some questions for whom no one really cares about the answer. So a good example of that is if you teach a topic and you want to know how students are learning that, but you happen to know that there aren't many other people who are interested in that particular topic, then perhaps that's not the most important question for you to pursue with SoTL research. Also, questions that have been addressed multiple times already. So a good example of this is, does active learning improve student learning? Well, that's been studied thousands of times, and even a meta-analysis has been done, and we know that indeed active learning can improve student learning gains. And so there's really no point in trying to redo that question. It's also problematic when questions are too vague and not expressed in a testable manner. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And questions for which there's inadequate or poor assessment. We'll also talk about that. So let's look at Dr. Metter's question and really think about how we could refine what she's interested in to a really good research question. So really, when we think about the case of Dr. Metters and her frustration with student learning of this concept of the central dogma, really what she is frustrated about is, why don't my students get it? No matter how I explain it, they don't get it. No matter what I do in class, they don't get it. And why is that? Well, that's a definite frustration, but not really a research question. So how could this question be refined? I want to look at 4 possible research questions. 2 of these would be addressed through a qualitative approach, a qualitative type of investigation, and 2 of these would be based on a quantitative investigation. And they also build off of the literature, so certainly don't have time to go into this, but this is an area that's been fairly heavily studied. And so if Dr. Metters were to read judiciously, as I recommended, then she would find a number of studies that have looked at this. And so these questions actually build upon work that's already been done. So from a qualitative perspective, Dr. Metters might ask, what is the source of difficulty in differentiating among replication, transcription, and translation? Or how do students describe the process by which they solve problems about the central dogma? So with this latter one, it suggests that a way to approach this question would be to do something like a think aloud procedure, where students are asked to solve central dogma problems, and the interviewer prompts them to say aloud everything they're thinking while they solve the problem. So these are a couple of options. On the quantitative side, notice that we have to really couch these questions in terms of what kinds of measures we have for this quantitative investigation. So these read, on a validated assessment of central dogma knowledge, so assuming we have that, and there are some available, do students who learn the central dogma through comparison outperform students who learn without comparison? So this gets at this really fine-grained question of a comparison type of learning and learning without comparison. This is, again, something that we know from the literature about how students learn. Secondly, on a validated assessment of central dogma knowledge, do students who receive scaffolded instruction about the meaning of arrows? We know that the arrows in the central dogma concept tend to confuse students. So if we scaffold that and provide some meaning about those arrows, do students who receive that scaffolding outperform students who receive written descriptions? Okay, so these are just 4 examples of how Dr. Metter's frustration, her idea for a SoTL project, could be turned into a very testable question. All right. So now that we've talked some about refining the questions, I want to kind of go through some resources to help you get started in SoTL. And so first of all, if your goal is just to learn more about educational research, I wanted to recommend 2 books. One called Discipline-Based Science Education Research, A Scientist's Guide. This is by Slater, and Bailey. And then by Shavelson and Towns, Scientific Research in Education. If you're new to SoTL research, you certainly need an idea of what the methods are like, how to navigate the literature, and so on and so forth. So these are a great starting point. In terms of navigating the literature, My colleague and friend Erin Dolan has written an excellent review in CDE Life Sciences Education about grappling with the literature of education, research, and practice. I highly recommend that you take time to read this article. In this article, Erin goes through really what educational literature is like, what it means to have a theoretical framework, how that theoretical framework compares with the background literature that we see in scientific research. She also gives a whole list of really 2 pages worth of education research journals and gives some description about those journals and what you might find there. And then she offers some advice about how to get started doing this type of research. Now, in addition to the journals listed by Dolan, there are some others that she did not include. So specifically, if you're outside of the area of biology, like if you're in physics, then you might consider the American Journal of Physics, or if you're in chemistry, of course, the Journal of Chemical Education, and so on and so forth. So there are several here that I've listed as well. Another thing that you have to think about goes back to this, one of the problems with SoTL research questions, or one of the potential problems, and that is there a good measure to assess what it is you're wanting to assess? There has been a history within SoTL research and even within biology education research of kind of creating a test for everything that you want to measure. But in fact, a much better method is to use a test for which evidence of validity and reliability has been gathered by other researchers on a population that's similar to the one that you want to study. And so one of the best ways to find these types of measures is to go to those journals that Dolan has listed, as well as the ones I gave you. But another great resource is found at this URL that I'm showing you here. These are concept inventories. This is specific to biology. Of course, there are concept inventories in physics as well, and also in chemistry, and even in biochemistry. But you want to dig through the literature and find things that other people have already tested and found to be effective. All right, so as we go into our time for questioning, I'd like you to take just a couple of minutes to think about a SoTL project that you may have in mind, something that you're interested in learning more about regarding your students, your classes, your teaching. And if you would just take a couple of minutes to write down 1 or 2 of those next steps that you might take. And then I'm happy to take questions. For many of you, we have about 10 or 12 minutes remaining, and I'm happy to take your questions. So I guess the way we'll run this is I'll give you 2 minutes to write things down, and then I'll call for questions.
And I'm actually here. I was able to get in on the phone. Can you hear me, Paula?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, this is Mark Johnson. I'm really sorry. I don't know what the problem was, but I finally was able to dial in. So we have a question here from Winona Hatcher. She was trying to take notes. Will the slides be available after the presentation? They will, and we also will be posting the presentation on our YouTube page. And I'm hoping, I'm recording this, that we in fact get a good recording of the audio. I see a question from Deborah Walker. Let me try to unmute you. Deborah, would you like to ask a question? No? Deborah Walker? Sean Park, do you have a question? How about you, Shannon Oblinger? Do you have a question? Why don't you please try to type your question in the audio in the chat? Okay, Shannon has no questions. Okay, we don't have questions right now. Okay, thank you, Chongwu Park and Shannon.
Right, so I think it's been like 3 minutes that you've had time to think about your next steps, so if there are questions, I'm happy to take them.
Does anyone have any questions? What are the most popular data collection methods in SoTL?
What are the most popular data collection methods? Well, let me give it a try, and if I don't hit your answer, then ask me again. So the methods really break down into qualitative and quantitative. So qualitative methods do not typically rely on numbers, but rather they seek to really describe in completeness all that's going on with some particular scenario. So let's take the central dogma. So a qualitative approach would not look for necessarily the prevalence of difficulties, but would look for what are all of the difficulties that students have. What really are all of the sources of problems that they have in learning this concept. And so the way that you tend to get at those answers through a qualitative approach is through interviews, through surveys, through student writing. Anything you can do to get students to reproduce the process of their thinking. And that's particularly when we're talking about studying student learning of something. In terms of quantitative approaches, of course, we rely on statistics. So commonly pre-post tests are used, or kind of multiple variable analyses where you look at the various conditions and see which factors seems to have the most bearing on whatever it is you're trying to understand. And then sometimes those two are combined into a mixed method study where you have both interviews, student writing, surveys, and also some type of quantitative measure, let's say a validated or an assessment for which there's evidence of validity. And then you would say, okay, what do I find from either one of these, and how do both of those data sets inform each other? So does that help?
I'm not certain how quickly you'll be able to answer, but it certainly helped me.
Okay.
He said, yes, thank you. Do the SoTL journals prefer qualitative or quantitative, or doesn't it not matter?
Yeah. I would say that in STEM fields historically there's been more of a preference for quantitative, but that is changing somewhat. So CBE, Life Sciences Education, for example, now routinely publishes qualitative research. And I should also add that if you want to contact me, I mean, there are some great books out there. So, for example, with qualitative research methods, there are just a couple of books you should probably get if you're interested in doing that. Not that you're going to sit down and read it cover to cover, but to help you with your design and just understand kind of the approach overall. And the same with statistics. So there's some great just handbooks to have available if you're going to do something like that.
And Songwell Park thanks you. Do we have any other questions?